The conference hall aboard the Harmony's Reach station gleamed with bioluminescent panels that shifted colors to accommodate the visual spectrums of 47 different species. Dr. Velshara stood at the central podium, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as her forearms gestured emphatically at the massive holographic display floating above the assembled delegates. As you can see from the compiled data, Velshara announced, her translator converting her clicking mandibles into standard galactic common, the Thrain crystal tiger maintains the highest recorded kill efficiency among terrestrial apex predators at 94.7%. A rumble of disagreement rolled through the amphitheater. Ambassador Krothos of the Thrain delegation preened his silver feathers with satisfaction, while several other delegates shifted in their specialized seating with visible displeasure. Objection. The voice came from the mollusk section, where Ambassador Grelmoth's tentacles slapped against his water-filled containment pod. The depth leviathans of Thalassos Prime achieve a 97.2% success rate. Your data is clearly biased toward terrestrial species. Velshara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of irritation that didn't require translation. The leviathans hunt in an environment with limited escape options. The crystal tigers must pursue prey across varied terrain with numerous obstacles. The comparison is hardly equivalent. Then your entire ranking system is flawed, countered Dr. Thixaran, an Avari whose wingspan stretched nearly 3 meters even when folded. Sky raptors from Area 7 can dive at speeds exceeding 500 kilometers per hour and strike with enough force to shatter reinforced bone. Where are they in your precious rankings? The symposium had been going like this for nearly 2 hours. What had begun as an academic discussion about predator classification across the known galaxy had devolved into a contest of planetary pride. Each species seemed determined to prove that their homeworld produced the most fearsome hunters in the universe. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the back row, her tablet open on her lap, taking notes but saying nothing. She had learned early in her diplomatic career that humans were largely dismissed in these gatherings. Earth was considered a backwater planet, barely worth the Concordance's attention. The fact that humanity had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago meant they were still viewed as children playing at the adults' table. She didn't mind. It gave her time to observe. Velshara cycled through her presentation, each slide showing impressive creatures from various worlds. The Canary scientist had clearly spent years compiling this data. Her ranking system was based on multiple factors: bite force, hunting success rates, prey-to-predator size ratios, documented kills, adaptability to different environments, and something she called fear factor response in other species. The Zerath Deathstalker ranks 7th, Velshara continued, displaying an image of a 12-legged creature with blade-like appendages. With documented kills exceeding 15,000 across multiple colony worlds. Before it was hunted to near extinction, someone muttered from the crowd. Velshara ignored the comment. At position 47, we have the great white shark from Earth. Sarah looked up from her tablet. Finally, something from home. The species shows impressive predatory instincts and has existed largely unchanged for millions of years, Velshara said. However, its hunting success rate is only approximately 50%. And it is limited to aquatic environments. Position 63, the polar bear, also from Earth. Excellent swimmers, impressive strength, but declining population and limited range significantly impact its ranking. Sarah made a note on her tablet, and at position 89, the African lion, Velshara concluded Earth's showing. A social hunter with decent coordination but relatively poor individual success rates. Krothos let out what might have been a laugh. The human homeworld seems to be lacking in impressive predators. Perhaps that explains their timid nature in galactic affairs. Several delegates made sounds that translated as agreement or amusement. Sarah kept her expression neutral. She had heard worse in her 5 years as a xenobiology liaison. Velshara pulled up her final slide, a comprehensive ranking of the top 100 predators across known space. This represents 3 decades of research across 412 worlds, she said with obvious pride. The methodology is sound, the data is verifiable, and the rankings are definitive. Your methodology is garbage, someone shouted from the reptilian delegation. The symposium erupted into chaos. Delegates stood, shouted, clicked, whistled, and growled their disagreements. Velshara tried to maintain order, but pride and territorial instinct had taken over. Each species was convinced their predators were superior, and no amount of data would convince them otherwise. Sarah watched it all with growing amusement. For beings who prided themselves on logic and scientific reasoning, they were acting remarkably like humans arguing about sports teams. She glanced down at her own tablet, at the files she had prepared just in case. She had been asked to attend this symposium as a courtesy, a token gesture to include the newer species in galactic academic circles. No one expected her to contribute anything meaningful. That was fine. Sarah had learned that being underestimated was often an advantage. The argument continued for another 20 minutes. Velshara managed to restore some semblance of order, though delegates were still muttering among themselves. The Canary scientist looked exhausted, her crystalline shell slightly dulled from stress. "Are there any final questions before we adjourn?" Velshara asked, her tone making it clear she hoped there weren't. Sarah raised her hand. Several delegates turned to look at her, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed condescension. The human had been so quiet they had almost forgotten she was there. "Yes," Velshara said, her mandibles clicking with what might have been annoyance. "The human delegate has a question?" Sarah stood holding her tablet. "Thank you, Dr. Velshara. Your research is quite comprehensive. I just need one clarification before we conclude." "Of course," Velshara said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Sarah looked around the amphitheater, meeting the eyes and eye analogs of dozens of species. "Are we counting trained or wild ones?" Silence fell over the symposium. Velshara's forearms crossed in a gesture of confusion. "Excuse me?" "The predators in your rankings," Sarah said calmly. "Are we discussing wild predators in their natural habitats, or are we including trained predators as well?" Velshara's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Trained? Ambassador Chen, I believe you misunderstand the nature of this discussion. We are classifying apex predators based on their natural hunting abilities and behaviors. Domestication is irrelevant to predatory rankings." Several delegates made sounds of agreement. "Trained animals are not predators," added Krothos, his tone dismissive. "They are pets, companions. This symposium is about natural hunters, not whatever amusements primitive species keep for entertainment." Sarah nodded slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I see. I just wanted to clarify before I present Earth's actual rankings." The amphitheater fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. Some delegates leaned forward with interest. Others exchanged glances that clearly said, "What is the human talking about?" Velshara's crystalline shell reflected the holographic light in sharp angles. "Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that Earth's predator rankings should be recalculated?" "Not at all," Sarah said pleasantly. "Your rankings for Earth's wild predators are approximately correct. They're quite thorough, actually." She activated her tablet, and a new holographic display materialized next to Velshara's presentation. "But you might want to see what happens when humans are involved in the equation." Sarah's holographic display came to life, showing a simple image of a domestic dog sitting calmly beside a uniformed human officer. The delegate stared at it with clear confusion. "This is a German Shepherd," Sarah began, her voice carrying easily through the now silent amphitheater. "One of several hundred breeds of Canis familiaris that exist on Earth today." Krothos made a derisive sound. "A pet. As I said, this is not relevant to our discussion of apex predators." "Please let me finish," Sarah said, and something in her tone made the Thrain ambassador settle back into his seat. "You're correct that dogs are companions. Humans have lived alongside them for approximately 40,000 years. But I think you're missing the important part of that relationship." She swiped her tablet and the display changed. Now it showed footage of a police dog in action, pursuing a running suspect, leaping through the air and bringing the person down with practiced precision. The dog's jaws clamped around the suspect's arm, holding firm while maintaining perfect control, not breaking bone but making escape impossible. This particular dog is trained to track humans by scent across distances of several kilometers, Sarah explained. He can detect explosives, narcotics, and other contraband with an accuracy rate exceeding 95%. His bite force is approximately 145 kilograms per square centimeter. And most importantly, he responds to over 40 distinct commands from his human partner. The delegates watched the footage with varying degrees of interest. Some were clearly still unimpressed. Companion animals can be trained, Velshara said, though she sounded slightly less certain than before. This does not make them apex predators. Their hunting instincts have been bred out through generations of domestication. Have they? Sarah asked. She changed the display again. This time, the footage showed working dogs in military operations, tracking through hostile terrain, detecting hidden enemies, and engaging threats with lethal efficiency. The images were striking. Dogs wearing tactical gear, parachuting from aircraft alongside human soldiers, swimming through dark waters, their eyes reflecting night vision camera lights. These animals are deployed in combat zones across Earth, Sarah said quietly. They save lives. They take lives when necessary, and they do it all while maintaining perfect obedience to human commands. A mollusk delegate spoke up, his tentacles waving thoughtfully. You have weaponized a companion species? We've maintained their predatory instincts while directing those instincts toward human purposes, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. She pulled up another image, a human in medieval armor, arm extended, with a falcon perched on a thick leather glove. Falconry has been practiced on Earth for over 4,000 years, she continued. We take birds of prey, hawks, eagles, falcons, and train them to hunt on command. They kill prey and return it to us. Some cultures use them for food, others for sport. But the principle remains the same: apex predators following human direction. The Avari delegate, Dr. Thixaran, leaned forward with sudden interest. You can command flying predators? We don't just command them, Sarah said. We breed them for specific traits: larger talons, better eyesight, stronger wings. Humans have been selectively breeding animals for tens of thousands of years. She showed more footage. Horses thundering across battlefields carrying armored knights, their hooves crushing enemies beneath them. Elephants adorned in war paint and armor, their tusks fitted with blades marching through ancient armies. War dolphins working alongside naval forces, trained to detect underwater mines and enemy divers. Wait, Velshara interrupted, her mandibles clicking rapidly. You said horses. Those are prey animals, not predators. Correct, Sarah agreed. We turned prey animals into weapons of war. Imagine what we can do with actual predators. The next series of images sent a visible ripple through the amphitheater. Humans standing inside enclosures with massive lions, their hands literally resting on the predators' manes. Trainers swimming with orcas, creatures that the mollusks had listed as formidable oceanic hunters. Handlers working with crocodiles, bears, tigers, and sharks. These are entertainment demonstrations, Sarah explained. We train apex predators to perform behaviors on command in front of audiences. The animals could kill the trainers easily, but they don't, because they've been taught not to. This is impossible, Krothos sputtered. No species can simply override another species' predatory instincts through training. And yet we do, Sarah said simply. Regularly, systematically, for thousands of years. She brought up a chart showing the diversity of dog breeds. Tiny chihuahuas weighing less than 2 kilograms, massive mastiffs exceeding 90 kilograms, elongated dachshunds, flat-faced pugs, and athletic border collies. All descended from wolves within a relatively short evolutionary time span. We don't just train predators, Sarah continued. We reshape them at the genetic level. We select for traits we find useful and breed out traits we don't. We've turned wolves into animals that guard our children, help disabled humans navigate the world, detect diseases through scent, and provide emotional support to those suffering from psychological trauma. Velshara's crystalline shell seemed to darken slightly. This is not natural. No species should have this capability. Natural or not, it's what we do, Sarah said. She paused, looking around the amphitheater. And I haven't even gotten to the disturbing parts yet. That got everyone's attention. The delegates shifted in their seats, some with curiosity, others with what might have been apprehension. Sarah took a breath and continued. For much of human history, we forced predators to fight each other for entertainment. Dogfighting, cockfighting, bullfighting. We captured wild animals and placed them in arenas where they would fight to the death while crowds watched. The images accompanying this explanation were deliberately chosen to be impactful without being graphic. Roman colosseums, gladiatorial records, historical accounts of bears versus bulls, dogs versus lions, organized combat between species that would never naturally encounter each other. The Roman Empire used lions and bears as execution methods, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the weight of the information. They would release condemned criminals into arenas with starved predators. The amphitheater was completely silent now. Several delegates had stopped moving entirely, their attention locked on Sarah's presentation. We've bred dogs specifically for aggression, she continued, created bloodlines designed purely for combat. Some human cultures developed entire industries around predator fighting. We didn't do this because we were afraid of these animals. We did it because we could. Grelmoth's tentacles curled tightly against his containment pod. Your species is barbaric. Was, Sarah corrected. Most of these practices are now illegal on Earth. But that doesn't change the historical fact that we did them. And it doesn't change what those practices prove about human capability. She brought up modern images, border security dogs, animals trained to patrol perimeters and engage intruders, service dogs that could detect oncoming medical episodes in their handlers, rescue dogs that could locate survivors buried under rubble from natural disasters. Humans don't just coexist with predators, Sarah said, her words measured and deliberate. We don't simply study them or avoid them. We recruit them. We enhance them. We direct their predatory instincts toward human purposes. A wolf is ranked in your system based on its natural hunting ability. But a trained wolf dog working with human military forces? That's a different classification entirely. Belshara's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they created a sound like rattling glass. You are saying that humans have removed themselves from the natural order, that you have placed yourselves above the predator-prey dynamic. I'm saying that your ranking system doesn't account for human involvement, Sarah replied. On Earth, wild predators exist in a natural state. Trained predators exist in partnership with humans. The two categories require different evaluation criteria. Dr. Thixaron spread his wings slightly, a gesture of agitation. What you are describing sounds like domination, not partnership. Sarah met his gaze steadily. That depends on your definition of partnership. The dogs that work with human police officers are cared for, fed and protected. They receive medical care and comfortable living conditions. In return, they perform tasks that utilize their natural abilities. Is that domination or cooperation? When one species controls every aspect of another species' existence, breeding, and behavior, Belshara said slowly, that is domination. Regardless of how benevolently you frame it, perhaps, Sarah acknowledged. But that doesn't change the reality of what humans have accomplished. And it doesn't change the fact that your predator rankings for Earth are incomplete. She closed her initial presentation and looked around the amphitheater. I apologize if this information is uncomfortable. But you asked me if we were counting trained or wild predators. The answer matters because on Earth, those are two very different categories. The silence that followed was heavy with implications that many delegates were only beginning to grasp. The symposium had transformed from an academic debate into something else entirely. Delegates who had been arguing about their homeworld predators now sat in various states of shock, confusion, or fascination as they processed what the human ambassador had revealed. Ambassador Krothos was the first to break the heavy silence. This is all very impressive theater, Ambassador Chen, but you have shown us entertainment animals and historical barbarism. Trained creatures performing tricks. This does not change the fundamental classifications of apex predators. Sarah nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. You're right. Let me show you the practical applications. Her holographic display shifted again, this time showing modern military operations. The footage was clearly recorded from helmet cameras and drone surveillance. Dogs moving through hostile territory, their bodies low and alert, human soldiers following behind them. The animals moved with purpose, checking corners, detecting threats that humans could not perceive. These are military working dogs deployed in active combat zones, Sarah explained. They're trained to detect improvised explosive devices, locate enemy combatants, and engage hostile targets when necessary. Their sense of smell is approximately 40 times more sensitive than human olfactory capability. They can detect chemical signatures that our technology still struggles to identify. The footage showed a dog alerting to something buried beneath sand. The human soldiers immediately stopped advancing, called in disposal experts, and carefully excavated a complex explosive device that would have killed the entire unit. That dog saved 17 human lives in approximately 30 seconds. Sarah said quietly. And he does this work every single day. She cycled through more footage. Dogs parachuting from aircraft alongside special operations forces, animals trained to operate in extreme cold and high-altitude environments, canines that could swim for kilometers in open ocean while carrying equipment. We have bred and trained dogs for every possible human environment and purpose, Sarah continued. Arctic search and rescue, desert patrol, urban combat, underwater demolition, medical detection, psychological support, personal protection, agricultural management. We have customized an entire species to serve human needs. Velshara's voice was strained. You keep saying customized, you mean genetically modified? Not in the way you're thinking, Sarah replied. Not direct genetic engineering, though we are capable of that now. This is selective breeding over hundreds of generations. We identify traits we want: stronger bite, better scent detection, higher intelligence, more aggressive temperament, calmer disposition, and we breed animals that display those traits. Over time, we create entirely new variations of the species. She showed a genealogical chart of dog breeds. How different human cultures had developed different types of dogs for different purposes. Herding dogs with strong chasing instincts but inhibited bite response. Guard dogs bred for territorial aggression. Hunting dogs with enhanced prey drive. Fighting dogs with increased pain tolerance and jaw strength. What you are describing is monstrous, Grelmoth said, his tentacles pressed flat against his containment pod. You have twisted natural evolution to serve your purposes. Yes, Sarah agreed simply. We have, for thousands of years, and not just with dogs. The display changed to show horses in combat throughout human history. Cavalry charges with thousands of animals thundering across battlefields, mounted archers firing from horseback, while their mounts maintained perfect speed and direction. War horses trained to kick and bite enemy soldiers, to charge into formations of armed warriors despite every natural instinct telling them to flee. Horses are prey animals, Sarah reminded them. Their evolutionary survival strategy is to run from threats. But humans trained them to run toward threats while carrying armored riders into combat. We overrode millions of years of evolutionary instinct through systematic training and breeding. Dr. Thixaran's feathers ruffled. And you claim this as an achievement? I claim it as a fact, Sarah said. Whether it is an achievement or an atrocity is a question of perspective. But it is undeniably what we have done. She showed footage of elephants in warfare, their massive forms adorned with armor and carrying platforms of soldiers. Historical records described these animals being trained to use their tusks as weapons, to charge enemy formations, to destroy fortifications. Elephants have existed alongside humans in certain regions for millennia, Sarah explained. We captured them, trained them, and deployed them as living siege weapons. An adult elephant can weigh 6,000 kilograms and possesses the intelligence to follow complex commands. Humans turned them into tools of conquest. The next series of images showed more recent examples. Dolphins trained to detect underwater mines and mark enemy divers. Seals and sea lions trained to recover military equipment from ocean depths. Even sharks fitted with monitoring equipment. Their migration patterns studied and sometimes directed by human researchers. You said earlier that molluscan depth leviathans were formidable predators, Sarah said, looking toward Grelmoth. Your rankings place them highly. But what happens when a human marine biologist spends years studying their behavior, learning their movement patterns, identifying their communication methods? We don't just observe, we learn. And once we learn, we use that knowledge. She showed footage of ocean research, humans swimming with enormous predatory species, collecting data, attaching monitoring equipment, even feeding these animals to condition-specific behaviors. Great white sharks approaching research vessels because they had learned that humans provided food. Orcas responding to acoustic signals from human researchers. Your natural predators remain dangerous in their wild state, Sarah continued. But introduce human knowledge, human training methods, human systematic approach to behavior modification, and the equation changes entirely. Velshara stood abruptly, her forearms gesturing emphatically. You are describing domination of entire ecosystems. This goes far beyond simple predator classification. Yes, Sarah agreed. It does, that's exactly my point. She pulled up a new chart. This one showing Earth's ecosystem management programs, wildlife preserves, breeding programs for endangered species, reintroduction initiatives for locally extinct predators. population control measures for species deemed to be reproducing too successfully. On Earth, humans decide which species thrive and which species decline, Sarah said, her tone matter-of-fact. We maintain populations of predators in protected reserves. We breed endangered species in captivity to prevent extinction. We relocate problem animals that enter human settlements. We track migration patterns and adjust our activities accordingly. Or you hunt them to extinction, Krothos interjected bitterly. Sometimes, Sarah admitted without hesitation, humans have caused the extinction of numerous species through overhunting, habitat destruction, and introduction of invasive species. The passenger pigeon, the Tasmanian tiger, the woolly mammoth, either directly or indirectly eliminated through human activity. She met Krothos's gaze steadily. But we've also brought species back from the brink of extinction through dedicated conservation efforts. The gray wolf was nearly eliminated from North America. Now their populations are recovering through human intervention. Bald eagles, California condors, humpback whales, all saved from extinction through human programs. So you play God with entire species, Dr. Thixaron said. We play steward, Sarah corrected, though I acknowledge the line between the two can be difficult to define. She brought up one final set of images. Modern animal training facilities, research centers, wildlife rehabilitation programs, and breeding facilities. The sheer scale was impressive. Thousands of locations across Earth dedicated to studying, training, rehabilitating, and managing animal populations. This is the reality of Earth's predators, Sarah said. In their wild state, they are exactly what Dr. Velshara's rankings indicate. Formidable hunters with impressive capabilities but limited by natural evolutionary constraints. But once humans become involved, those constraints change. We enhance what we find useful. We suppress what we find problematic. We redirect natural instincts toward human purposes. She paused, looking around the amphitheater. You asked if we were counting trained or wild predators. On every other world represented in this symposium, those categories are identical. Predators exist in their natural state, following evolutionary patterns established over millions of years. But on Earth, wild predators and trained predators are fundamentally different classifications. Velshara's mandibles had stopped their rapid clicking. Now they moved slowly, deliberately. What you are describing is not natural evolution. It is directed evolution, forced evolution. Artificial selection, Sarah agreed. Darwin identified it alongside natural selection. Nature selects for traits that improve survival and reproduction. Humans select for traits that improve usefulness to human purposes. Both processes shape species over time, but human selection operates on much faster timescales. And with much more devastating consequences, Grelmoth added. Sarah inclined her head in acknowledgement. Often, yes. Humans have caused tremendous ecological damage through ignorance, greed, and short-sightedness. Sarah allowed the silence to stretch for several long moments. She could see the delegates processing what she had presented. Their expressions, for those species whose expression she could read, ranging from fascination to horror to deep unease. Finally, a delegate from a species Sarah had not heard speak before raised a tentacle-like appendage. The translator identified them as a representative from the Quilari system. Ambassador Chen, the delegate said, their voice translated as soft and measured. You have shown us impressive examples of human capability to train and direct predator species. But these are still just animals following conditioning. Sophisticated conditioning, perhaps, but ultimately no different than the behavioral patterns any species might develop through environmental pressures. Sarah's expression grew more serious. You think what I've shown you is the extent of human capability? Let me be very clear. Everything I've presented so far represents the acceptable face of human-animal relationships. The parts we're proud of, or at least willing to acknowledge publicly. She tapped her tablet, and the holographic display shifted to show historical images that made several delegates recoil visibly. For most of human history, we didn't just train predators, Sarah said, her voice taking on a harder edge. We forced them to fight each other for entertainment. Dogfighting, cockfighting, bullfighting, bear baiting. We created entire industries around forcing animals to engage in combat. The images showed ancient arenas, medieval entertainment, and disturbingly, more recent photographs from illegal fighting operations that had been shut down by law enforcement. We would capture predators from different regions, animals that would never naturally encounter each other. and placed them in enclosed spaces where they had no choice but to fight. Sarah continued. We wagered money on which animal would survive. We bred specific bloodlines for aggression and pain tolerance. We conditioned animals to attack on command and to continue attacking even when injured. Grellmoth's tentacles curled so tightly that his containment pod's fluid visibly swirled. You created suffering for amusement? Yes, Sarah said simply. We did, for thousands of years across multiple cultures. And while most of these practices are now illegal in modern human society, they occurred on a massive scale for much of our history. She showed documentation of underground fighting rings, genetic records of dog breeds created specifically for combat, historical accounts of spectacles in the Roman Colosseum, where exotic animals were pitted against each other while thousands watched and cheered. The Romans imported animals from across their empire, Sarah explained. Lions from Africa, bears from Europe, tigers from Asia. They created artificial conflicts between species that would never naturally meet. They forced herbivores to fight carnivores, put multiple predator species in the same arena, and watched as natural territorial and survival instincts played out in lethal combat. Dr. Thixaron's feathers were completely flat against his body now, a sign of extreme distress in his species. This is barbarism. It's human history, Sarah replied. We also used predatory animals as execution methods. Criminals or prisoners of war would be placed in arenas with starved lions, tigers, or bears. The animals would kill them while crowds watched. The Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to beasts. Velshara's crystalline shell had taken on a dull, cloudy appearance.
Why are you telling us this?
What purpose does it serve to describe your species' cruelty? Because you need to understand what humans are capable of, Sarah said quietly. Not just the impressive training and conservation efforts, but the full spectrum of human behavior toward predator species. We don't just coexist with predators. We don't just study them or learn from them. We bend them to our purposes, whether those purposes are noble or terrible. She pulled up more disturbing historical records, organized dogfighting operations that continued into the 21st century, illegal blood sports that persisted despite laws against them, breeding programs designed to create animals that would fight to the death rather than submit. Certain dog breeds were developed specifically for fighting, Sarah explained. Their genetics were manipulated through selective breeding to enhance aggressive responses, increase pain tolerance, and strengthen bite force. These animals were literally designed to kill other animals in pit combat. And your species allowed this? Krothos demanded, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine outrage. Not just allowed, Sarah said. Encouraged, organized, profited from. Dogfighting was legal entertainment in many human cultures until relatively recently. Even now, illegal fighting operations generate millions in gambling revenue in certain regions. She showed rescue footage from police raids on fighting operations. Scarred animals, injured and traumatized, some so conditioned to fight that they would attack anything that moved, others so broken that they would never recover their natural behaviors. This is what happens when humans apply systematic methodology to predator behavior, Sarah said. We can train them to be companions, protectors, and helpers. Or we can train them to be weapons and gladiators. The underlying capability is the same. A long moment of horrified silence filled the amphitheater. Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the weight of the information. We've also used predators as tools of war beyond simple training. Military forces have deliberately introduced invasive predator species into enemy territories to disrupt food supplies. We've weaponized disease by introducing infected animals into populations. We've used predator behavior patterns to develop hunting strategies and military tactics. She showed examples. Historical accounts of armies using war dogs not just for combat, but for psychological warfare, trained to terrorize enemy populations. Falcons trained to intercept messenger birds carrying strategic communications. Even dolphins trained to carry explosive devices to enemy vessels during modern conflicts. Your species has turned predation itself into a weapon, Velshara said, her voice barely above a whisper. We've turned everything into a weapon, Sarah replied. That's part of being an apex predator. We don't just compete in our environment, we reshape our environment to eliminate competition. She pulled up ecological data showing how human expansion had affected predator populations. habitat fragmentation that isolated predator territories, urban development that eliminated hunting grounds, agricultural practices that removed prey species, industrial pollution that contaminated food chains. When predators become inconvenient to human interests, we remove them, Sarah said, sometimes through direct hunting, sometimes through habitat destruction, sometimes through introduction of competitive species. The North American gray wolf was systematically eliminated from most of its historical range because it threatened livestock. The Tasmanian tiger was hunted to extinction because it occasionally killed sheep. You commit genocide against species that inconvenience you, Grelmoth said, his tone flat with shock. Sometimes, Sarah acknowledged. Other times we implement conservation programs to save them. Human behavior toward predators is inconsistent, often contradictory, and frequently driven by short-term economic interests rather than ecological wisdom. But it is always consequential. She showed data on endangered predator species, populations reduced to tiny fractions of historical numbers, genetic bottlenecks that threatened long-term viability, ecosystems fundamentally altered by predator removal. We've also learned from our mistakes, Sarah added, showing recovery programs and reintroduction efforts. The California condor population was reduced to 27 individuals before humans implemented a breeding program that has raised numbers to several hundred. The gray wolf is being reintroduced to regions where it was eliminated. We protect endangered predators with legal sanctions and dedicated conservation resources. After nearly driving them to extinction, Krothos observed bitterly. Yes, Sarah agreed. We create the problem and then spend tremendous resources solving it. It's not an efficient system, but it has prevented numerous extinctions in recent decades. Dr. Thixaron spoke up, his voice strained. What you are describing is a species with absolute power over its planetary ecosystem. A species that can direct, manipulate, eliminate, or preserve any other species at will. That's exactly what I'm describing, Sarah said. And it's why your predator ranking system is incomplete. On most worlds, predators exist in ecological balance with their environment. On Earth, predators exist in whatever state humans decide they should exist. She pulled up her final set of data. Genetic databases of domesticated species showing thousands of distinct breeds, subspecies and variations all created through human-directed breeding programs. Dogs, cats, horses, cattle, chickens, pigeons, species that had been transformed into hundreds of distinct types based on human preferences. We don't just train predators, Sarah said. We redesign them at the genetic level. We select for traits we find useful and eliminate traits we find problematic. We create entirely new variations of species to serve specific purposes. A wild wolf and a modern pug are technically the same species, but humans have transformed one into the other through systematic breeding. The symposium had transformed completely. What had begun as an academic debate about predator classifications had become something far more serious. Delegates who had been arguing about their homeworld's most impressive hunters now sat in uncomfortable silence, processing revelations about a species they had dismissed as insignificant. Ambassador Krothos was the first to break the silence, but his earlier arrogance had vanished. Ambassador Chen, what you have described is deeply disturbing. Your species has demonstrated a level of ecological control that borders on— He paused, searching for words. Absolute domination. We prefer the term ecosystem management, Sarah said with a slight, humorless smile. But yes, domination is accurate. Velshara had been silent for several minutes, her mandibles moving in small, rapid patterns that suggested deep processing. Finally, she spoke. I need to understand something, Ambassador Chen. If humans possess this level of control over predator species, why are humans not ranked as the apex predator in my classification system? Sarah had been waiting for this question. She pulled up a new holographic display, this one showing a simple chart with 3 categories listed in neat rows. Because you weren't discussing humans, Sarah said. You were debating which predator species deserves respect and fear based on natural hunting capabilities. I was simply clarifying that on Earth, predator classification requires context. She gestured to the chart. Humanity's actual predator classification system looks like this. The first category read, Wild predators, studied and managed. Wild predators on Earth exist in their natural state, following evolutionary patterns established over millions of years. They hunt according to instinct, respond to environmental pressures, and maintain ecological balance within their habitats. These are the predators Dr. Velshara ranked: sharks, bears, lions, wolves. We study them, we track their populations, we protect their habitats or eliminate them depending on human interests. The second category read, domesticated predators, partners and companions. Domesticated predators have been selectively bred for thousands of years to serve human purposes. They retain predatory instincts but direct those instincts according to human guidance. Dogs, cats, falcons, ferrets. These animals work alongside humans, hunt for humans, protect humans, and exist in relationships that are supposedly mutually beneficial. The third category read, weaponized predators, tools and soldiers. Weaponized predators are trained and deployed for specific human objectives, usually military or security purposes. War dogs, combat dolphins, messenger pigeons, cavalry horses. These animals are not companions or wild creatures. They are equipment. Living equipment, but equipment nonetheless. Velshara's voice was quiet when she spoke. And the fourth category? Sarah added a final line to the chart. Extinct predators, those that could not adapt. Species that came into conflict with human interests and lost, Sarah said simply. Predators we hunted to extinction, either deliberately or through habitat destruction. They exist now only in historical records and museum specimens. The silence that followed was profound. Grelmoth's tentacles moved in slow, troubled patterns against his containment pod. You have categorized entire species based on their usefulness to humans. Those who serve are preserved. Those who resist are eliminated. That's an oversimplification, but not entirely wrong, Sarah admitted. Humans don't have a consistent ecological philosophy. Different cultures, different time periods, different individuals, all approach predator species differently. Some humans dedicate their lives to conservation. Others hunt predators for sport. Most exist somewhere in between, generally unconcerned until a predator directly affects their lives. She pulled up population data showing the dramatic recovery of some predator species alongside the continued decline of others. Gray wolves in North America, nearly eliminated by 1970, recovering through conservation efforts today. Tigers in Asia, declining despite conservation efforts due to habitat loss and poaching. Humans can save species or doom them, often simultaneously depending on regional policies and cultural attitudes. Dr. Thixer spread his wings slightly, a gesture of discomfort. What you are describing sounds less like a classification system and more like a judgment system. Humans determining which species deserve to exist. We call it conservation triage, Sarah said. There are limited resources available for preservation efforts, so humans must decide which species receive protection and which species receive less priority. Economic value, ecological importance, cultural significance, and pure human sentiment all factor into these decisions. Sentiment? Velshara asked. Humans generally prefer to save species they find appealing or charismatic, Sarah explained. Giant pandas receive enormous conservation funding partially because humans find them adorable. Less visually appealing species often receive less attention and fewer resources, even if they are ecologically more important. That is absurd, Krothos said flatly. It's human, Sarah replied. We are not purely rational beings. Emotion drives many of our decisions, including which predators we protect and which we eliminate. She showed images of conservation programs, pandas in breeding facilities, tigers in protected reserves, wolves in reintroduction programs, all funded by human organizations and supported by human laws. But make no mistake, Sarah continued, her tone hardening slightly. When humans decide a species is a genuine threat, we are extremely efficient at eliminating that threat. The thylacine, the passenger pigeon, the Caribbean monk seal, all eliminated within living memory of their extinction, not through natural environmental pressures, but through systematic human action. A delegate from a species Sarah didn't recognize spoke up, their translator rendering their speech in flat, emotionless tones. You speak as if this is normal, as if one species having absolute control over all other species in their ecosystem is simply an accepted fact. On Earth it is, Sarah said. Humans control approximately 75% of Earth's ice-free land surface. We have modified ecosystems across the entire planet. There is no region on Earth, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains where human influence is not detectable. Every predator species on Earth exists because humans permit it to exist. She let that statement settle before continuing. When apex predators enter human settlements, we relocate them or eliminate them. When predator populations grow too large, we implement culling programs. When populations decline too far, we implement breeding programs. We track, tag, monitor, and manage predator species across the planet. And if a predator proves useful to humans? Velshara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Then we breed it, train it, deploy it, and integrate it into human society, Sarah confirmed. Humans have been doing this for so long that we have entire scientific disciplines dedicated to understanding and optimizing the process. Animal psychology, veterinary medicine, selective breeding, behavioral conditioning, all developed to improve human capability to control and direct animal behavior. She pulled up one final image. Earth, as seen from space, covered in lights indicating human cities, agricultural regions, infrastructure networks, and managed wilderness areas. Every light on this image represents human presence, Sarah said, and in every region where humans exist, we determine which predators exist alongside us. The question isn't whether predators on Earth are dangerous in their natural state. Your rankings accurately reflect that. The question is whether any predator on Earth remains in a truly natural state. Ambassador Crotho stood slowly, his silver feathers still flat against his body. Ambassador Chen, I believe I need to ask you a direct question. What is humanity's ranking in your predator classification system? Sarah met his gaze steadily. We don't rank ourselves, why not? Because we're not in the competition, Sarah said quietly. We're not competing with other predators for resources or territory. We're not following evolutionary pressures or maintaining ecological balance. We're the ones making the rules. The implications of that statement rippled through the amphitheater like a physical wave. Velshara's mandibles had stopped moving entirely. You are saying that humans exist outside the predator classification system because humans control the classification system itself. I'm saying that predator rankings measure which species are most successful at hunting within their ecological niche, Sarah clarified. Humans don't have an ecological niche. We create ecological niches. We modify environments to suit our needs. We eliminate species that threaten us and preserve species we find useful or appealing. We are not apex predators in the traditional sense. We are the force that determines what apex predators exist in the first place. Grellmoth's tentacles had curled into tight spirals. How many predator species have gone extinct due to human activity? Difficult to calculate precisely, Sarah admitted, but conservative estimates suggest humans have caused the extinction of approximately 500 vertebrate species in the past 500 years, many of them predators. For comparison, natural background extinction rates would have resulted in approximately 20 extinctions during the same period. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. And how many species have humans saved from extinction? Dr. Thixaran asked.